I am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interviewed Elise Powers, the founder of Eleview Consulting. Eleview Consulting leads workshops around the world for professional services firms on skills such as mentorship, building psychological safety, and navigating critical conversations. Elise has specialized in teaching communication and relationship building skills for over a decade and has been featured in the New York Times, Chicago Tribune, and ABC News. She is LinkedIn's leading expert on career acceleration and networking. During my interview with Elise, we discuss her upbringing, where her parents taught her how to ask a lot of questions and to remember what others said so that the next time that she spoke to them, she could follow up. We discussed the importance of active listening and how her early learnings led to her career to teach others the same skills. I think you're going to find this episode so fascinating, not only the learnings that she had from a child and what she dealt with it as an adult and in her profession, but also the learnings that she had from her parents that she's let go of or working to let go of as well. There are so many things that we talk about in this podcast about just getting back to yourself. And this is why we have created a free workbook for you to download. It's a 7-day work-life harmony workbook. And you can go to businessbalancebliss.com/workbook, and you'll find exercises and reflections that we share here on the podcast all the times with our listener. But this is for you to step back, and it's really to design a way for you to create real change over the next 30 days. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs. I am very happy to be able to interview today my friend Elise Powers. And Elise, do you want to give a little background on yourself before we get started?
Sure. I am based in the Chicago suburbs and have lived in Chicago for about 10 years now. I run a company called Eleview Consulting, and we specialize in leading workshops on interpersonal skills like communication, leadership, and relationship building at companies and law firms and accounting firms all around the world. So I'm just so glad to be here with you today.
Well, thanks for joining me. Elise and I were introduced by Alan Colton, and that's the power of networking, right? So very excited to be getting to know Elise in this way, and for all of you to get to know her. And so we're going to just start off. Maybe you can just give us a little background on your upbringing in Chicago. What were your parents' backgrounds, and did you have siblings?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I have an interesting family.
Okay.
So I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, as you did. I know you lived there as well, Amy. And my parents are both attorneys, and they felt very strongly that I wasn't going to be successful in life unless I knew how to get along with people. And so they came up with these crazy rules for me and my younger brother growing up to try and teach us communication and interpersonal skills. So, for example, one of those rules that they had for us was starting at age 3 years old, anytime the house phone rang, I had to answer the phone, the landline, and I couldn't hand the phone to my parents until I asked that person at least 3 questions about themselves. And then as I got older, the rule progressed where one of the questions I asked had to be a follow-up question to show my active listening skills. So you can imagine the fighting, the screaming matches that would happen in our house anytime the house phone rang. And I wouldn't admit it to my parents, but it really did pay off, so much so that I've devoted my life and career to teaching these skills to others. My parents were total helicopter parents in every way. They still, they know every single friend of mine, their first name, their last name, where they went to college. Like there's no saying, oh, I'm heading out to dinner with a friend. It's like, which friend? What are you talking about? Tell us everything. So they're very intense. They also have such an entrepreneurial spirit. They both started their own law practices, and that was definitely instilled in me and my brother. Just this idea of the challenges that come when you work for other people. And there are certainly challenges of working for yourself and having your own business. But my brother and I both decided that we wanted to kind of follow in our parents' footsteps. So my brother is 2 years younger, and he lives in New York City and is a celebrity fashion stylist. And he gets to travel around the world styling famous people for red carpets and the Oscars and TV appearances. So we've both found ourselves in what I would even call the professional services world, where we're interacting with people, we're using our communication, creativity. And yeah, my parents just crazy helicoptering did pay off.
So it's kind of funny, that like hits me with a memory because I had to answer the phone as well. For those of you that are younger, was in a time of no ID where you knew who was calling. You just had to pick up the phone. And so I had to answer it. Hello, may I help you, please?
Love it.
And did I get made fun of as I got older? So, I mean, I answered that way, I think, all the way through college till I moved out because that was the only way you were allowed to answer the phone.
It's a habit. Yes. And then it's also, we had to call our friends' houses and it was their parents who answered the phone usually. So you'd have to
ask them questions.
Parents.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a different era.
It totally was different. That's so interesting and such a funny memory. So maybe you can tell me a little bit about your parents and why they found this important. So what was it in their upbringing or their way to becoming attorneys that this became such an important thing for them?
I think that they, number one, probably knew that I wasn't going to be in science or math because I did not get those genes from them. So they realized I better be good at all the other skills because I'm severely lacking in anything technical. And they are so well liked by everyone who knows them. They are just beloved by their friends and really in the community, I think, as a whole. And it's because they make everyone they interact with feel important. They ask a ton of questions to people. Like my friends, I'm 32, and my friends still say, like, can I come to your house? I just want to sit on the couch and have your parents ask me questions about myself. And none of my friends' parents ever really would ask me questions. But from a young age, it was like, Josie, sit down. We want to hear all about your classes and your homework and your teachers and your friends and your boyfriends. And they just have this innate ability that I think has proved them very well because they've been successful both personally in their relationships and professionally. And part of it is I just saw them doing that. And so that I learned through osmosis is even little things like my dad was always, before we went to a family gathering, it would be, all right, let's sit down and review everyone's name and what they told us last year at Thanksgiving so you can follow up and ask them about how that, project at work went or how their vacation went. And then it was, we had to practice giving 2-armed hugs. Like my parents hated the 1-armed.
Oh, yeah.
It was all these little things that they were obsessive about that I kind of became obsessive about.
So what is it in them that drove that though? Like why? It's interesting two people would find each other that are like-minded like that because usually one might be and not the other. But how did they grow up? Like what was their family situations like?
I do not think any of these skills were instilled in them. So my dad in particular had a very dysfunctional family growing up, very uninvolved parents who had alcoholism. I mean, he grew up in a very difficult household where he was pretty much on his own starting at age
Mm-hmm.
5 to raise himself. And my mom, her parents were warm and friendly, but there was no helicoptering happening. I think my
Mm-hmm.
parents are both very intense people, and it's probably a reaction to them not getting a lot of guidance growing up that they felt like they needed to overcompensate in a way for me and my brother and give us what they wish they would have had more of. And I think both being attorneys, they're skilled at asking questions and being curious and taking an interest in others, both for benefit professionally. It makes them better attorneys in representing their clients, but also it's just an important part of the job. I also think my parents don't really like to talk about themselves. That my mom always says, like, I'm the least interesting person. Why would I talk about myself? I want to hear about all these other people. And so I don't think that there's this desire to, I don't know, talk about themselves, where I think most people really do like to talk about themselves. So
Yes.
it works out well that you can just get the other person talking.
Yeah. It's interesting that I even though that's a skill of attorneys, I have definitely met a ton of attorneys in my life that aren't skilled at that outside of work, and where your mom is saying she's the least interesting person in the room. Most attorneys do not feel that way. So it's just interesting. Like, what type of attorneys were they?
My mom is a divorce lawyer. My dad does personal injury.
Oh, wow. Okay. So they meet each other in law school?
They met after law school at the courthouse. Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, they're just, they're quirky. I don't know. They dated for 8 or 9 years. So they had me when they were in their 40s.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I mean, my dad especially is highly neurotic and just like cautious about everything and,
Mhm.
just really focused on they both are on how do you make other people feel important. And I also
Mhm.
think that I think anyone who makes a real concentrated effort to ask other people questions and take an interest in them, you see how much that means to another person. You see them light up.
Mhm.
I can't tell you how many conversations I have with people where they say, wow, this was such a fun conversation. Or maybe we're leaving and there's 2 minutes left. We're walking out the door and they go, wait, but we just had lunch and I never heard anything about your life. And I'm thinking, you loved this conversation because all you did was talk about yourself. I'm really happy for you. I don't have much to say. So I think once you see the power of taking an interest and what that does to another person, it almost becomes addicting, where you want to give that gift to as many people as possible.
So when you were younger, was this annoying?
Very annoying. Yeah. Very. I would always have to spend like half of a party with the adults. I couldn't just go play with the
Yeah.
because I had to learn how to talk to the adults. And I mean, that I think was a real skill that helped me starting in college when I was interviewing for jobs is I never felt like a kid. I always felt almost like a
Right.
peer to adults.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was in a similar situation. So when did it flip for you that this became something that you decided to focus on in your career? Like when you were younger, what did you want to be? I mean, so you said you're not good at math and science, but was there something you were dreaming that you were going to be?
Uh, Always a CEO.
Okay.
I mean, there's a video of me, my parents and aunts and uncles. Anytime we went on a big family vacation, they would interview all 6 cousins one by one and ask us a series of questions. And when I was, yeah, maybe 6 or 7, they did this. And one of the questions was, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I look straight into the video camera and I say, I want to be a chief executive officer. And they say, well, why do you want to be a chief executive officer? And I said, because I want to make billions. And I mean, I was so young and it just like, I always wanted power, I think. I always
Uh-huh.
was really ambitious and defined success by power and money. And when I was in college, my sophomore year of college, I got over 10 internship offers all through networking. And my friends weren't having that same success. So I realized, I'm good at interviewing and finding a way to worm myself into a job. And it just comes naturally to me. Like I'd always be
Hmm.
doing my friends' resumes and writing their emails and cover letters, and I was thinking, I got to get paid for this. So I started this company in college. I went to Indiana University, and I started a company. It was called Strategic Internship Consulting, SIC. And I would meet with students one-on-one and coach them in how to walk into an interview. Like we would practice a firm handshake, eye contact, making small talk. I would write their resumes. I'd do their cover letters. I'd help them build out a networking plan to tap into their personal and professional relationships. And I ran that company all through college. And it was just something that I realized like that was my strength, is understanding how to win over other people. And I could teach
Hmm.
that skill. So I loved that business. I then had a more traditional corporate career, which I didn't love, and eventually started my business in 2019, which I think is kind of this iteration of that strategic internship consulting.
So what things did you learn from having a business in college?
I learned all the things that go into running a business other than doing the work. So you have
Hmm.
to come up with a brand and a website and think about trademarking and pricing. I also realized that it doesn't feel like work most of the time because you love what you're doing. And I loved not working for someone else. I loved being able to come up with a random idea, and within 24 hours, it could be live. I could make it happen. I didn't have to go through any red tape. I also realized the importance of my reputation as a business owner. I realized that I was the business was me in a way. And so I was very conscious of how I dressed and what I did at frat houses. And because these were the people I was selling to, the other college kids.
Right.
I couldn't be, a crazy college kid. I mean, I definitely was at times, but I was hyper aware of my reputation as a business owner. I took it seriously.
Hmm. So what things did you not like about
The
it?
pressure, the immense
Which one?
pressure, and
The
maybe
pressure.
thinking
Yeah.
now also as a business owner,
Hmm.
that you don't have people to rely on to guide you through things, to ask
Hmm.
questions, to brainstorm, to navigate things that you're not good at. There's certain things that I'm just not good at, but I don't have anyone else. So that was true then, and it's true today. There are pros and cons, and it has to be something you love and that you're passionate about. And I was so passionate about that college business that it really made it energizing and worthwhile.
Yeah. So in the work that you do now, what are the principles that you've brought through from your childhood of
Mm.
learning about communication?
Hmm. That it's all about the other person. So
Hmm.
that could be the theme of
Hmm.
just about all of the workshops that we lead at our clients. It's
Hmm.
whether we're teaching active listening, how do you ask questions to signal that you understand someone's goal or an assignment? It's making them feel heard. Or maybe we're doing a workshop on networking and relationship building. I often get asked by people, you know, what do we talk about in when we're making small talk or at a client lunch? And the answer is whatever they want to talk about. It doesn't matter what you want to talk about. You figure out what they like and you go with it. Or if we're even doing a workshop for managers on giving feedback, it's not just what you need from them, it's tying the feedback into their desired goals, how your recommended behavior changes get them where they want to be. So I think that's really the pillar that I took away from my parents and from my college business, is having this others awareness. We talk a lot about self-awareness, but I think what's not talked about enough is others awareness.
Hmm. Yeah. And, in the work that I do, it's utilizing mindfulness training to get to the same end goal. And I think people struggle with a message that they want to get across in that conversation. And I'm sure you've heard that as well. So what are the advice to you? Like let's say it's a very difficult relationship. You want to make sure that you get your point across of the things they need to do. How would you approach it? How would you tell someone to approach it?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that anyone has to understand that in order for someone to take your advice, to apply it, they have to trust you and they have
Mm-hmm.
to respect you. And I think the way you earn trust is by signaling to the other person that you see them, you're seeking to understand them. And so you can't jump, 3 steps ahead by just telling them what you want. You have to start by building that trust. And trust is earned over time through repeated actions and micro actions. So, you know, when working with leaders who are so frustrated with their team not doing something, or they need to give this difficult feedback, and we practice what they're going to say, how they're going to say it, using our frameworks. If there's not a baseline level of psychological safety where they feel understood by you, where they feel like, they trust what you're saying is also in their best interest, it's not going to be effective. There's just no way to do that.
Mm-hmm. So how would you go in and approach the conversation?
I think if there is a level of understanding that there hasn't been psychological safety created. Maybe a
Mm-hmm.
leader is saying, okay, no, I've snapped at them. I've lost my temper. I haven't been the best manager over time. I would start with an acknowledgement of that. Hey, I
Mm-hmm.
want to have a candid conversation. I've been reflecting on how I've been showing up at work for the last 6 months, and I haven't been showing up like the leader I want to be and the leader you deserve. These are the 3 things that I wish I would have done differently. I'm not making excuses for myself. I want you to know that I understand that that was really unhelpful behavior on my part.
Mm-hmm.
As I think towards the future, here are the things that I think we can both do in order to improve our working relationship. Here's what I want to do differently, what I commit to, and here's what would be really helpful if you could do differently. So it's being clear on what to do in the future. I think too often we focus on what not to do. Don't do that again, but what to do. So making clear specific recommendations. And then I also think there has to be an accountability element where perhaps the manager says, why don't we schedule a touch base 4 weeks from now? I want to reconnect and get a pulse on how am I showing up as a leader? What can I do differently to make a 5% improvement? And we'll also touch base on what you've been doing differently. Is it working? So it's kind of owning up to what hasn't been working well and signaling that you are also making an effort to change. You can't just put it all on this other person.
Yeah, I think that's very good advice. So, how did you get your training in this?
Life. Honestly, I have no certifications, and I really learned this through growing up in the, boot camp that was the Gelwick's household. I also, when I had those corporate jobs at Kimberly-Clark and management consulting, I learned a lot from poor decisions that I made and mistakes.
Mhm.
And it's always been my goal to at least help as many young professionals as possible not have to learn the hard way, to
Mhm.
learn from my mistakes and just conversations that I had had that didn't go well, and upon reflection, why they didn't go well. And then I'm just an avid studier of social psychology and reading and learning and applying that and kind of weaving that into kind of my practical lessons learned.
Awesome. So, reverse on the opposite side of that. So, you've taken a lot of things that you learned growing up that has helped you. What things have you decided older that was their belief system, but you have shifted your belief system or pivoted on a lesson based on your own life experiences?
Hmm. Money was a big topic in my household.
Mhm.
I mean, it was just talked about constantly. I think part of it was my mom being a divorce lawyer. There
Mhm.
was always money conversations that she was dealing with, and she saw a lot of women in particular going through a divorce who had no control over their finances or even
Mhm.
any awareness of how much money they had.
Right.
And then also from my dad and the scarcity mindset, he grew up with no money at all, and he didn't want that for us. So, my dad would put us to sleep at night, and to kind of convey the idea of earning interest, he would say, okay, go to sleep and make some money. And it was his idea of saying, you make money while you sleep, you're earning interest if the money's in the bank. And so we'd wake up in the morning and go, how much money did we make overnight? And he'd say, I mean, really, I'm telling you, intense. So my brother and I both were obsessed with saving every single penny we made. We never bought anything with, the lemonade stand money or our bar mitzvah money. And that has somewhat messed my brother and I up, where, I'd rather walk 3 miles than pay $1 for a bus ticket. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I was crazy.
And that's not your hourly rate.
Yeah, exactly. I was losing money by walking. So that really haunted me up until I'd say my mid-20s, when I went into therapy to figure out how can I not live such a rigid lifestyle. Like I would be 22, 23, I'd go into the McDonald's to take mustard packets rather than buy a bottle of mustard. Like it was this obsession with I have to save, save, save. So that is one thing that wasn't very helpful.
Yeah. So how did you break from that? Because that's a mindset that's a very hard mindset to break.
Very hard. It really was through therapy and also building an understanding of finances, where I look at what I have in the bank. And this was a huge factor when I quit my corporate job to start my business. I mean, think about the risk you're taking by giving up a salary. Well, I met with my financial advisor and we talked about like, how much runway do I have? How long can I last running this business if I don't make a penny? I also am very lucky that I had a safety blanket in my parents. Like I knew I wouldn't lose my apartment if the business didn't work out. So I really I worked very actively on fixing this mindset. It still is there, but now, if I want a coffee, I'll go buy a coffee and I don't sweat it. Once a week, it's fine. Whereas like that would have been a huge deal. In fact, I will never forget, I did this spin class in downtown Chicago a few years ago. This was 10 years ago, maybe. And I got a free pass for the spin class. And they told you where to park. And I parked there. And I went in to get my parking validated at the front desk when I checked in. And they validated it and said, okay, so now your parking's only $8. And I said, what? I still have to pay something for parking? And I had I was hysterically sobbing throughout the entire spin class about this $8 I was going to spend that I wasn't expecting. I didn't budget for. I mean, I literally was sobbing throughout the entire class. So you can see how deeply rooted this issue is.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I grew up so similar. I earned, I think it was $6 a week. I had a checkbook at 12 years old. And had to reconcile my bank statements, and everything I earned, that's where I had to buy my clothes or go out with my friends, or it was like where my friends could like go out and shop. Like I was on this budget that I watched everything, and each budget period had to last me 6 months. So I couldn't blow it like right away. And then I ended up having 3 jobs during high school because my parents did lose everything. And that experience also created a belief system of mine where I always had to have a backup job. And it wasn't until and I started my own business, but then I was like an adjunct professor for like 3 colleges in my 20s. And like I always had another backup because I knew you could lose everything and I would pay everyone before me. And, it was just a vicious cycle. And one of the things, it was actually my ex-husband, one night was like, if you're going to do this, you might as well just go get a salary because like you're working more like constant because you're so scared of one thing not working versus another. And, I think it was like in my 30s where I finally was like, wait a second, like I have earned, like, I have money in the bank account. I can like splurge on little things, and not feel, as long as I know I have like the cushion that I want and so forth. It is like these little shifts over time that you have to give yourself permission, and it can still revert back really easily and affect the people around you. So, how did you get to what were the little things besides the coffee that to really kind of break that mindset?
Really, I sound totally crazy if I talk about the things that I
Oh no,
think.
I think there's so many people with this issue. One
Yeah.
way or the other. Yeah.
Yeah. I honestly, and you know what's funny is I still have this. And so I
Uh-huh.
have a 1-year-old daughter, and we live in a nice big house in the Chicago suburbs. Like, we have absolute financial security. Like,
Yeah.
still obviously have to work, but like, it's not like we have $0 in the bank. And I have not bought a single thing for her ever. Not an outfit, not anything. Everything has been from community members who post on Facebook, and they say, "Hey, we have a crib. Does anyone need one?" I grab it. Does anyone like 18-month clothing? Right now, my nanny is out driving around picking things up from people's doorsteps.
Yeah.
Little like a onesie here, a little hat here. And I'm thinking to myself, I know rationally that the gas money we're spending for her to pick
Yeah.
up this
I
hat
was gonna just say,
costs more than the
yeah,
hat.
what
But
you're
I'm like,
paying her per hour to do that.
totally. And I'm like,
Yeah.
but I don't want to spend money on things that she's going to grow out of and other people are giving away anyways. So
Well, yeah, and there is something to be said for like, baby stuff that lasts, a few months too. But
few
yeah,
weeks.
yeah, it's when it goes like where you're like, okay, is there a place in the middle?
Yeah, exactly. So I am still dealing with this, Amy.
Yeah. But I think it's really important that we all work to like what that awareness is of those things that creep up on us, because we have to understand where they came from and then understand the programming, which, if like even when you're asleep, you're nervous about money,
Yeah, I
which is
know.
me.
Yeah.
Like that is your supposed to be your relax and reset, but really in your head, you're like, is it making enough money while I'm
Uh-huh.
sleeping?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
there really isn't an off time. So it's like giving yourself that reprieve of that is really important, and being able to be aware when it comes up. And I think for everyone listening to this, whatever it is, it doesn't mean that you can definitely change it when you're aware of it,
Yeah.
but being aware of it is the first step.
Yeah.
Usually, like the fact is, like your dad went through life never being aware of it,
Mhm.
right? Like, because this was such a fear for him that turned into a belief system that turned into a teaching lesson and programming for you, that he wouldn't be aware of it. He thought that was the right thing. And it doesn't mean it's the wrong thing. It's just there's an extreme,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And so like we have to give ourselves, like that celebration moment that we're even aware that we just had our nanny do that.
You have to laugh at it a little bit.
And
It's
it's no different than what you're saying to the leaders to say in
yeah,
a feedback session, right?
yeah,
Like, I could have done this different.
exactly. Exactly. Just aim for incremental improvements.
Yeah. But those little incremental improvements over time, no matter if you're talking about your corporate life or your personal life, are the things that make big changes
Yep.
in the long run, so having that awareness, I think, is really, really important. So thanks for sharing that story. I know.
All too true.
I know. So what do you like to do for fun?
I like to sit on the couch and watch TV. Like, that
Oh.
is the ultimate relaxation for me. I probably do it 30 minutes a week, and I treasure it, and I wish I could do it more. I enjoy working out,
Mhm.
which I know sounds foreign to some people. I'm a big Peloton person, so I have the
Me too.
weights classes and the biking. I don't
You
always.
don't have to park for Peloton.
What was that?
You don't have to find a parking spot for Peloton.
Exactly. I can do it at my own house. I don't have to pay a gym fee. I
Exactly.
don't have to pay gas to get to a gym. So, yeah, I I don't love the workout while I'm doing it, but I love how I feel afterwards.
Hmm.
And so I'm pretty disciplined about waking up early each morning and doing that. I love to travel. So I was really lucky to travel all around the world growing up and kind of developed this love for going to very different cultures and trying to experience it and understand it. So those are my favorite things to do.
That's awesome. So, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs, just anyone running a business or starting up a business, as far as, the things that they might be unaware of that they're going to encounter? Because, like you said, having a business of your own, the good part is you get to do the thing that you love. No one's telling you the right or wrong of doing it. But there's a lot of struggles because I think, at least I've seen over time, most people think that's what being an entrepreneur is, but that's probably 20% of your job, that you get to do the things that you like.
Yeah.
So, what kind of advice would you give to an entrepreneur?
To be totally honest with you, Amy, my advice to someone who wants to be an entrepreneur is don't do it. And I say that because the only way it's going to work is if you feel like I have to do this. I do not have a choice. It is a
Hmm.
fire inside me. It cannot be extinguished. And those people are going to ignore the don't do it advice from me.
Hmm.
If you don't feel like you have to, you cannot do anything else, it's not going to go well because it's if you start a business and you're successful at it, it is so all consuming. It is so much pressure. It is such an emotional roller coaster that tears you down. And then you have these high highs. And then an hour later, you're
Yeah.
in a fetal position crying. It is
I,
not for the faint of heart. So
Mhm.
I felt like I was at the top of a burning building when I was at my corporate job. And my only option was to jump out the window. I had no other choice. And that is why I started my business. And I feel very strongly that if you don't feel like you're at the top of a burning building, don't do it to yourself. Collect
Mhm.
that corporate paycheck, get the 4 weeks vacation, get the benefits, and watch more than 30 minutes a week of
Oh,
television. Yeah. Yes. Truly.
yeah. No, I do think it gets glamorized a lot, being an entrepreneur, and there are definite, like you said, benefits of doing that. But you really have to be prepared for everything else that comes with running a business, and making sure that you're ready to spend money on other experts that are
Yeah.
going to help you and things that you don't know how to do, and be able to listen to that. So I remember my first business, I thought it was going to be part-time. I was going to do an accounting. I started an accounting practice, and I thought it would be part-time. And that way I don't have a boss and I can take care of my baby, when I could. And I started realizing, no, everyone's my boss now.
Mm-hmm.
My
Yeah.
clients were my boss. My employees were because then I had to work around them and making sure they got their stuff done. And I was like, wait a second. How does
Yeah.
this-
Exactly. My colleague just emailed me, hey, this, firm wants a virtual workshop this week in February. It looks like you're in Palm Springs that week for your one vacation of the year. And that's the only week they want it. And I was like, okay, then we're doing a workshop while I'm on vacation. I mean, really, that
Because
is
that's when you need the work. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think that's really important, because you have to be ready for the effort and the work that goes behind it. And it can look a lot more glamorous from the outside, right? Because of all the years of trying to figure it out.
oh my gosh, everything seems glamorous.
Yeah.
You know, travel all over for these speaking engagements,
Yeah.
conferences, whatever it is. And people always say, oh my gosh, I saw you were in Vancouver and then Boston and New York and blah, blah. Like, your life is so cool. What they don't see is last week I was sleeping on the floor of the airport at my gate overnight because my flight got canceled. Then I had to
Yes.
pay $800 out of pocket to get on the first flight out the next morning and go straight
Yeah.
and meet a 9-hour workshop. Like, there is nothing glamorous about that. I
Yeah.
smelled horrific. I looked disgusting. I was miserable and
And
exhausted,
you're
but
gonna show up with a smile on.
because I have to. And if I didn't love what I do, I would have really hated it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, awesome. All right. So I like to close with some rapid fire questions. So it's on a category. So either family or friends, money, spiritual, or health.
Let's do family. Well, no, let's do health. We've already talked family and money.
Okay. Perfect. All right. So things or actions I don't have that I want to have.
Things or actions I don't have that I want to have. I want to have strong abs. And somehow I'm a year postpartum and still don't have my abs back. That is what I would really like.
It's a journey. Things or actions I do have that I want to keep with my health.
I want to continue waking up at 5 a.m. and it's more 5:03 a.m. for whatever reason. I only do alarms at odd minutes. 5:03 a.m. I want to continue doing that and getting my workout in before 6 a.m. It's just such a great way to start my day.
So what is it about the odd minutes? I'm sorry.
I have no idea. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
It's my way of saying, okay, it's not 5 a.m. It's not that bad. It's 5:03, but
Yeah,
5:03 is like way too lazy.
Things or actions I don't have that I don't want to have with my health.
I don't want to get complacent. I don't want to, I fear bad habits. So I guess that's what I would say. That's why I'm obsessive about working out every day, is because I feel like if I miss a day, I'll never work out again for the rest of my life. So it's not that I'm extremery. So complacency, I don't want.
And last, things or actions that I do have that I don't want.
I do have a sweet tooth and I pretty much eat anything I want whenever I want. So I wish I did not have that.
And that's why you wake up at 5:03 every day
Exactly.
and work out.
Balance. Yeah.
I'm with you on a lot of these answers. So anything you want to make sure people leave with today that we didn't cover or you want to emphasize from our conversation?
I think it would be listen more, take an
Mm-hmm.
interest in other people, ask more questions, use the phrase tell me more when they tell you something, go a little bit deeper, and then follow up on what they said. Put reminders in your phone, in your calendar. They have a trip coming up or a job interview, text them that morning. I'm thinking of you. Good luck today. No one else does it. And it really makes a huge difference.
I love it. I think the follow-up's a big one.
Huge.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with everyone today. I think there's so many great lessons for people to take away.
Oh, thank you, Amy. This was so fun.
And now for my mindful moments with Elise Powers. So I just love this conversation about communication and also about belief systems that we can have that maybe we don't even realize where it comes from or just really, really hard to break. So the first thing that we talked about was these focus that Elise's family had on communication and how important relationships are and having people really enjoy being in your presence. And from a young age, Elise was trained on how to communicate and really understanding what it was like to put effort and intention around that communication. So, one of the things that her parents talked to her about was to make sure to ask a lot of questions and be prepared with questions that you're going to ask people when you're around them. And the other thing that her father really had her do was make sure that after she had a conversation that she writes down the people's names that someone talked about, what was important to them, so that the next time that she was going to see a person, that she was going to be able to follow up on some of the things that she heard. And this is really an important lesson that, we talked about, that people can feel like you had this great conversation when you practically say nothing and not even talk about yourself at all in that conversation. So the fact that she was taught this in such a young age. And the key question of how do you make other people feel important? And the power is in taking an interest in someone else. So she had to learn that in order to grow in her career, in order her to make money, in order for her to be powerful, that communication was a key thing to making sure those relationships were secure. And this was a lesson she was taught very early that she has used in her life to be able to create a whole business out of training people on a lot of these principles and seeing what worked and didn't work in her life, as well as, just being a leader and those experiences and what works. And some of the principles that we talked about is that to make sure when you're going into a conversation with someone else, especially if you're having to give feedback, that you're going into that conversation making sure that it's all about the other person. It's not coming in and talking about what you're disappointed about or what your issues are, that you are deploying active listening, asking a lot of questions, and making sure that that person feels heard, that you aren't getting distracted, that you're listening to what they say, you're repeating back maybe what they say, and you're really trying to understand how to take the information that you are receiving and be aware of how it feels to be in their shoes with their perspectives and whatever goals that person has, that you can tie back the feedback to those goals and things that they said. And so the big lesson that she talked about here is in order to earn trust so that we can give feedback, it's important that we seek to understand what that person is going through and that we do this over time so that these little micro actions create psychological safety for someone. So when we have to give them feedback, that they're not going to feel like it's harmful, that they know that you are there to help. Now, another belief system, which I think is a belief system for a lot of people that sometimes we don't recognize that have happened in our life that we talked about, was money. And sometimes this can be one of those really uncomfortable conversations of what our belief systems are around money and how those belief systems get created. But I do think it is really important to understand where our thought process came in about money. Because what happens is that as we grow up, if we start taking those belief systems we had when we were younger, they may not apply to who we are today. And that was one thing that we talked about, that her mom was a divorce lawyer. So she saw a lot of women not having financial control and understanding money that were clients of hers. And her dad came from a scarcity mindset that he wanted to make sure money was in the bank and could make money while you are sleeping. And so there was never enough money that you could save in order to be able to get comfortable. And so we talked about what that was like over time for her, to really process the way that she was taught to make money. And we even, talked about the fact that, she even had this pressure while she was sleeping to make sure the money was making money. And what belief systems for her really aligned to her as a person today, and the struggles that we have in our own lives to break from those belief systems. So I think it's really a key thing here, and it's demonstrated in what she talked about in the first area of communication, is showing this vulnerability. And the fact that Elise showed this vulnerability makes her more authentic, and we can connect with her because this is something that so many people go through, and people want to connect at some level of where the struggle is and not trying to be perfect in front of everybody. And so even realizing her story about having, the nanny go around to all of these different houses to look at the, things that people are giving away, it's really important that we do take note in ourselves of when something doesn't serve us anymore. And, I talked about in here in my own life of really having to recognize that, because in my own life, we lost everything we had when I was a teenager. So that scared feeling stays with me even until this day. But I a lot of times have to break from it and just know that I have worked really hard to get where I'm at. I have taken precautions that maybe my parents didn't take. Not to say it can't happen, but it's important that we only have one life to live. So we do things in a safe way financially and make sure we have things allocated, but having fun is a really important piece of life. And these are the things that we talk about in our coaching programs at the B3 Method Institute. And there's these areas of freedom that we have to recognize so that we can break through. And we've even created a workbook so that you can take action now in your life so that you can start this journey. So if you go to the Work-Life Harmony workbook, you can find it at businessbalancebliss.com/workbook. You can download this for free. We are giving this for free to our listeners, to the people in our community that support the things that we are doing. And it gives you exercises and things to reflect upon each day so that you can really create the real change that you want. And create this 30-day journey for yourself. And it usually takes about 30 days to break a habit. And we're not there yet. It just might be one piece of the puzzle that we're breaking. But this will get you started on your journey. So again, you can go to businessbalancebliss.com/workbook. You'll also see promotions on our Breaking Beliefs podcast page on the amyvetter.com site for this as well, if you don't remember the businessbalancebliss.com site. So I want to thank all of you for taking this time to listen to Elise's story and also reflect on your own. And really step back and think about what are the things that you can do to really observe where these things crop up for you and what things you can do to shift it in your own life. Because at the end of the day, our energy is contagious. And when we're not intentional about our energy, we can show up in ways that we don't intend to. So this is the work, and we all have the work to do every single day. And just stay constantly aware of the decisions we're making so we can be intentional in the actions that we take. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to sharing our next episode with you as well. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.